Well, and I understand there will be a number of different opinions in here, and this is why I think this is a very interesting thing to think about, because it's a little bit of a dilemma. And I think what you said is exactly right. What if the commander believes, or the president, or whoever it is that's making the decision, that the damage done thus far in the war has been so horrible, and the enemy, whoever your enemy is, has been so unyielding and unwilling to surrender, and the projected cost of the continued war is so unfathomably awful, that the commander believes that the only way to end the war quickly, which is actually what the commander may believe, of course, is the most humane thing to do, is to, as you may say, bring the war to the people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
To a quick conclusion.
A quick conclusion. Now, this may very well be. In fact, I'm sure that's exactly right. That this was Sherman. This was what was in Sherman's mind. This was what was in the mind of Truman. I guess we were at Truman. Yeah, with Hiroshima, or even with Dresden. I'm not so sure. But again,
yeah, it really was.
Right. Okay. How do you wrestle with these issues? What would Aquinas say? Instead of what's our opinion, I guess really the issue is what would Aquinas say to that? And it's hard, again, because Aquinas was writing in the 1200s, and these are all common, or modern, right, these are modern.
But I would bookmark that by telling you, certainly 15 years ago when I was on the faculty of the National Defense University, and I'm sure, 99% sure that it still is, that when students there, who are many of them going to become flag and general officers, the party line that was very common with the faculty and the student body as well was that in order to bring general war to conclusion, you've got to have the populace supporting the idea that general war needs to stop. And the way you do that is you take the war to the general populace. Mm-hmm. And the thought process there was, it is kinder to do that sharply and quickly and intensely, mm-hmm, and get it over with, mm-hmm, than try to make sure everything is on a parity basis and drag this thing on forever.
And by bringing war to the populace, did they mean
firebombing Dresden?
Whatever. Okay.
I would like to point
Well,
out
Hiroshima
that
was also
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
but that definitely brought the war to the populace.
Well, I think it was the Navy that lost, 7,000 men off of the coast of Okinawa prior to that,
yeah,
with the kamikazes. I mean,
Right.
these guys were going to carry on to the nth degree.
Right.
With huge losses for both the Japanese and the Americans.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think the estimates were like 500,000 Americans and
Right.
millions of Japanese.
Yes,
I believe.
this is all very true.
It's quite
And it
likely
just
I would
raises-
not have married my wife in the circumstance, because her father was destined to be right there in the invasion of Japan.
Gets to that whole idea of we've got to kill them first so that they don't commit so many horrible atrocities against their own people and against themselves.
Starting to sound Augustinian, isn't it?
Yeah,
Isn't
yeah,
it? Kind of going back.
yeah.
Now, see, and this is obviously, this is a very huge issue, okay? And the weapons of warfare that are available, or that were and are available, and have been for the last 50, 60 years, are very different than what Aquinas was dealing with. But think about, just think about, we all have our opinions on this, and they're very, this is a hard one. But Aquinas seemed to say that right intention is measured by, if you intend to bring the war to the people, you got a problem. Okay. Just be aware that Aquinas said that. All right. And what Aquinas would say if he were alive today, I have no idea. But
There was a simpler world in those days, too.
Much simpler.
There was
weapons of warfare
not
were
the
different.
communication,
Right.
the input, and the concerns of the populace didn't have quite the impact that they do today and for the past 100 years.
Armored
Right.
knights on horseback and the mercenaries.
Yeah,
And
nation
that's
states.
Now here's something else to consider too when you think about Aquinas. Even though the heart's impossible to measure, he did say that there were sort of benchmarks for measuring evil intent. And just kind of throw this into what you're thinking about when you think about Aquinas on double effect. One of the things that he said was a benchmark that measured evil intent was when you destroyed more than what military necessity required.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you can start asking the question, well, what's meant by military necessity? But then you have to throw in proportionality. Remember that. How do you measure proportionality in military necessity? So these are all issues to think about when we're wrestling with. And I think firmly believe that, and I know that probably all of you agree, you're all in this class, that citizens, even if you're not soldiers, if you're retired or if you've never put on a uniform, you've never been, whatever the situation is, these are issues that I think we should all be we should think through. This is big stuff. But I don't think there's an easy answer with Aquinas, even on some of these things that we've done in our past or that our enemies have done. I think that Aquinas probably would say this is bad, based on what he said about double effect.
Yeah, you're probably
This is
right.
bad. Okay. All right. Any other questions on that? Because that's a hot, controversial topic. All right. Honey?
Oh, no, well, I was wondering if you actually, it makes it difficult to apply Aquinas to today because of the nature of the relations between citizens and their governments today are very different. How you define where does a sort of a war machine nation get its resources? You know, if the people are compliant, it's hard.
If the people are compliant, are they innocent still?
Oh, that's a good
If the
point.
people
They
are working
can
at
be.
if the people are working at the munitions factory, are they still innocent bystanders, or are they now weapons of warfare? Are they now actively supporting the war itself?
Yeah.
Just something to think about, because innocent bystander does not necessarily mean they're just not wearing a uniform. I don't, and that's what Just Work teaches today. If you're a civilian actively engaged in the support of the war, you've just become a target.
Yep.
Okay.
There's another
But
point.
that's a good point. I should have brought that up.
During Aquinas' time, if most of the peasants provided their own weapons, armor, and whatnot,
Right.
and now, a lot, especially during World War II, the common people provided weapons for the troops, but didn't necessarily get involved in combat.
Right.
Once again, you've got the same. They both made weapons.
And this is where it really gets tough, because what is meant by being actively involved in supporting the war effort? Okay, I mean, if you're the scientist in the lab and you're making the weapon, well, that seems pretty active. But what if you're working at the kitchen that helps feed the troops? Is that still actively engaged in a war effort? Is that still a target?
Doesn't part of that go to how you feel in your heart too? Because obviously during World War II, people supported the war and were actively supporting it. Where I think now we've gotten farther away from, a cause that's completely everybody's behind.
Right.
You might have people that are just supporting it to get a paycheck versus rosy the riveters.
Well,
Volunteer
when you say
army.
supporting it to get a paycheck,
Volunteer
what do you
army.
mean by that? Yeah, because
I mean, it's a job versus
It's a job.
Right.
I hate to use the word, a patriotic job.
Right,
It was
right.
from World War II, where people were doing it because they absolutely believed in it and they sacrificed. Or now you might have
Well,
someone
yeah.
that, they might say, okay, I'm doing something good, but they're not behind it like they used to be.
Yeah, there's a very fine line now between
Right.
a uniform trigger puller and a contract trigger puller.
that's right.
Well, you had the
That's right.
draft
We had
in World War II.
contractors,
You had the draft in World
Aren't
War
they
II.
now fighting
That
that?
has a lot to do with it.
Isn't that part of what is happening at Guantanamo? Is who is a combatant?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And that's the big question. Didn't they just release some people because they were not in uniform?
Right, right. Yeah,
They're definitely working against us, but not in uniform. And I think,
Shooting at
no.
us.
Exactly.
Well, not
Sorry,
wearing uniforms,
who's
but
out there
shooting
waiting
at
for
us.
them?
Right, right. Now you say shooting at us. To me, that's on the end of the spectrum. That's clear. To me, and there's certainly disagreement. But if you're a civilian and you're shooting and you're not even in uniform, then you're not. You're way over there. I mean, you're a war criminal. You are not wearing a uniform and you're engaged in combat, and that is in violation of the law of war. But again, I think that the real controversy comes when you talk about, and we don't really bomb cities anymore, or at least let me rephrase that. We haven't bombed a city like Dresden, okay. But what if in Dresden there was, a factory that made tanks right in the middle of the city? All civilians working there, and they didn't want to work there, but they needed the money. Let's throw that in. They didn't care a thing about Hitler or the war effort.
Whether it's slave
For their slave labor, yeah.
But are they targets?
Yes.